Hello everyone. I feel honored to take this opportunity to welcome and introduce Colonel Adam, our today's keynote speaker. He is a distinguished scholar. His books and papers are published by Routledge at the international levels. He has been serving various Asian and American universities as the guest expert. His major forte is humanities. We cordially invite you, Colonel Adam sir, to speak to our participants, and may you ignite their hunger of knowledge. Thank you, sir.
Good day. It's a pleasure to be with you again, virtually, for this conference about online learning. Today I'm going to speak about online learning in relation to the university. Therefore, I would like to begin with what is a university. And What is a University is a chapter written by St. John Henry Cardinal Newman. And I think he describes it very well. He says, if I were asked to describe as briefly and as popularly as I could what a university was, I should draw my answer from its ancient designation of a studium generale, or school of universal learning. This description implies the assemblages of strangers from all parts in one spot. From all parts, else how will you find professors and students for every department of knowledge? And in one spot, else how can there be any school at all? This, of course, will be an interesting thing that we have to deal with in speaking about online education in a distance mode. But as we'll see, Newman is much more concerned with the residential. But we can adapt this to an online program as well. Accordingly, in its simple and rudimental form, the university is a school of knowledge of every kind, consisting of teachers and learners from every quarter. Many things are requisite to complete and satisfy the idea embodied in this description, but such as this, a university seems to be in its essence, a place for the communication and circulation of thought by means of personal intercourse through a wide extent of country. Now, from this excellent definition, we can actually gather that the primary purpose of the university is mutual education and the formation of one generation of students by the previous generations of teachers, who were in turn formed by previous generations of their own teachers, forming an intellectual lineage. One generation forms the next, and the existing generation is ever acting and reacting upon itself in the persons of its individual members. Now, this is very important. What Newman is talking about is this interpersonal, mutual form of education, formation, more so than even education. It's about forming the entire character of a person. As we will see, what Newman is speaking about in drawing students from all parts into one field, into one university, drawing every department of knowledge into a unity of knowledge, bringing one, going from the many particulars into one universal, remember the school of universal learning, into a unity of knowledge is the goal of the university for Newman. Now, Newman at his own time was also, in this sense, he was going back to an ancient conception of the university. But Newman was working in 19th century England. So he was quite cognizant of the powers of the press, as he referred to it as the proliferation of books and articles and periodicals and things that were just simply available. And he recognized that this type of information, it was essentially, he looked at the printing press the way we would look at the internet today. I can find almost anything I would need in short order. I have all of the information in the world at my fingertips, so to speak. The press was a more primitive version of this. But Newman was very adamant that man cannot be educated merely through reading. Reading itself, self-education is a poor education. There has to be a taught element. There has to be that interpersonal communication to make an actual education, a proper formation. He says, whenever men are really serious about getting at something precise, something refined, something really luminous, large, something choice, they don't go merely to books. They avail themselves in some shape or other of the rival method, the ancient method of oral instruction, of present communication between man and man, of teachers and students, of the personal influence of a master, the humble initiation of a disciple, and in consequence, the great centers of pilgrimage and throng, which such a method of education necessarily involves. So a place of pilgrimage, the university basically becomes a place of pilgrimage and throng, where people come together to engage in this tradition of oral learning, of communicating with each other personally. For Newman, only the most general type of knowledge can really be attained merely through readings. The detail, the color, the tone, the air of life that makes it live in us, you must catch those from whom it lives already. You need a teacher to go anywhere beyond the general. And remember, Newman's idea of education is to take these many particulars and unify them, to come to a unity of truth, to find the truth in everything and bring it into a larger unity of truth. And it's very Aristotelian. He's going from particular, concrete particulars into general universals, into universal scientific laws, and to laws of logic, into universal metaphysics, theological issues that he's talking about. And so to go from books, you can get general ideas, but they have to be instantiated. These general universal ideas, to be really understood, have to be instantiated in a concrete particular, which is the person of the teacher. You learn by emulating the teacher primarily, rather than merely the content that the teacher teaches. Right? So actually he says now, for students of language, this is very important. He says you must imitate the student in French or German who is not content with his grammar, but goes to Paris, France, or Dresden, Germany. He goes, immerses himself in the language. It's one thing to learn the grammar, one thing to learn the book, but to actually go to the country itself, to immerse yourself in the language. That is what he likens. The university is an analogy for that you throw yourself into the study of things. And again, he makes a great emphasis, puts great emphasis on the oral tradition part, on the part about interpersonal communication through speech. This is a very important thing. And actually this, Newman, of course, being a cardinal, had a very religious bent. But when we look even at our earliest education formation at the hands of our parents, grandparents, and elders, and which is usually a theological education of some point. If you're raised as you are raised in your religion, how are you taught? You're taught usually through oral tradition, through stories, Panchatantra, Jataka tales, Bible stories, lives of the saints. These are the types of Aesop's fables. These are the types of things that we learn. These individual stories, these many particular stories, embody universal concepts that we obtain by listening to the individual stories. We come to knowledge of these universal contents. And as I said, this is generally the earliest cultural formation everybody has. All children are enculturated through stories, usually religious or cultural narratives, usually at the hand of your mother or your grandmother who sits and tells you these tales, right? So this is where Newman's saying this is the essence, not just for the child, but for everybody. This interaction is the essence of formation, of education. And as we were saying, it's one generation forms the other. And this you'll also find, this is basically, it's Guru Shishya education, where the Guru enculturates the disciple in the field of knowledge he's talking about. This requires a direct personal teaching relationship. And this relationship between the teacher and the student is aimed at a comradeship, a type of friendship. You're not going to be friendly with all of your professors necessarily in the same way you would be with your friends, but the professor's job is to enculturate you with some kind of comradeship, but also to encourage friendship among the students. And this is where we go to Aristotle. Friendship is vital for life. But Aristotle classified three types of friendship. One that was based on utility. I am friends with this person because I can get something. One that is based on pleasure. This is your friends, that you play cricket with, that you watch movies with, and things of that nature. And they're pleasant, but it's only as far as it goes. The greatest type of friendship, the friendship that really makes a life well lived and worthwhile, is a friendship that's based on connections in virtue. Connections that bring us together at a very deep personal level. And these are the type of connections we're trying to foster in a university. Not that everybody's going to agree, but that everybody can respect everybody else's perspective equally. And they can defend their views, and they can sharpen their views against each other. Iron sharpens iron. In this sense, your friends are not only a spice of life, they are life. So you need to be cultivating these friendships, because your friends are who helps you to recognize truth wherever it is found. And this is the purpose of education, to see truth in the particulars and bring them into a unity of truth, incorporate it into a unity of truth. This is a process. It's a cultivation of the mind. Newman phrases it such: the intellect, properly trained and formed, has a connected view or grasp of things. This process of intellectual cultivation is what we're trying to do. We're trying to grasp universal truths from particular truths. Now, in this is where we need to speak about too. Newman has a very interesting concept of a liberal education in this sense. He doesn't mean that we should only search for the particular truths in our field. We search for the truth in everything. This is where friendship is important, because our friends know things we don't. We know things they don't, about different fields, about different life experiences, different sciences, different types of knowledge. So we need all of these particular small t truths in order to incorporate them into the larger universal capital T truth. And for Newman, this includes everything. Because education is a process, it's an intellectual cultivation, it's a cultivation of the mind that never ends. It's a never-ending process. This means that you can succeed in any kind of science, any kind of field of knowledge. The really cultivated intellect, the intellect we're trying to cultivate and create in the university, can build a bridge as an engineer, or a business as a businessman, and create poetry and play musical instruments. He can do anything, he or she can do anything that he or she sets their mind to, because they approach education as cultivating an intellect that is capable of grasping the truth in many things. In turn, this goes back to, like, as we were saying about the teacher being an exemplar. The educated person, the person that really has this type of education, this intellectual cultivation, is a well-rounded person of character who will be gracious, humble, friendly, and wise. Wisdom, not knowledge, is the aim of a true liberal education. Now, I agree wholeheartedly with Newman's assessment of what a university is, or at least ought to be normatively. But, and as we've seen, Newman puts a lot of stress on the residential model. But he was also quite accepting of the technology, the press of the time. So I believe that Newman would also be quite accepting of online education, because it has disadvantages compared to the residential model. But it also has a lot of built-in advantages in that we can reach more and more students in more and more ways. And if we design the curriculum properly, we can provide at least a partial resemblance of this residential model. And actually, I mean, online education, it's, some purists would want to try to just denigrate it, or try to hold up the residential model at a higher level. This will not last long. It cannot last indefinitely. Times change, technology changes. We have to accept what we're doing, and we have to look at the pros of this too. Like I said, we can make quality education available to more and more people at a cheaper cost and a higher quality than ever before. But as teachers in online education, we have to be very careful that we do not stray from the model of what a university is, which we have just discussed with Newman. So in online education, just as in residential education, the teacher is the most important figure. Remember, the teacher is the guru, he's the master. He's forming another generation. He's forming them in this cultivation of the intellect. He's enculturating these students. The teacher is the most important figure. Therefore, I mean, if, to a great extent, as in anything, online education will produce what we put into it. So if we simply construct lessons from some PDFs, a few books, write this, write that, and do that, our students will suffer. They will not be properly educated. They will basically be self-educating. On the other hand, it doesn't mean that we have to have meetings every single week, because it's often impossible, especially in an international setting. But we can do things to try to encourage this friendship, this comradeship. And professors, we have to be very proactive in how we grade. We have to be very forthcoming with our feedback. We have to actually help our students and really nurture them. Actually, I was very lucky in that I had some teachers in online settings that were absolutely wonderfully welcoming to me. It helped me in so many ways. And that I met at conferences afterward, and also helped me publish things. So I've had a lot of good teachers in that respect. I've had other ones that followed more of the model of, okay, just do this, do this, do this too. So the teacher makes a big difference. Students also. Students have to be humble. They have to be grateful for the instruction, even when they find themselves in disagreement. And this is where the teacher, even in an online environment, must remember that the idea is not merely to impart knowledge. It's to teach students to become wise. We teach students to become wise. We teach students to cultivate the intellect only by challenging them. Whatever they say, we have to be involved in this process. We can't sit back and let it happen. When students turn in assignments, we must challenge them. We must push them forward. And in return, the students, they have to be humble and grateful. Students, you have to respect the guru. Doesn't mean you have to agree with him. This is the important thing. Actually, I will usually push my students always to disagree with me. I will take a position I don't actually believe to force them into disagreement. Iron sharpens iron. And again, I had an excellent experience with a teacher online that at the very beginning, I thought this man was a crank. I was like very unsure of his lessons. I thought this is a bit odd. But he's the teacher, I'm the student, so I'm going to follow it. In the semester, over time, then things came together. I understood he wasn't a crank. He wasn't crazy. Seemed that way, and I didn't agree completely with everything he taught, but it did fit together. It was coherent, and it was mostly true. So, but I would have never gone to that experience if I was arrogant. If I had said, this man is just nuts, he doesn't know what he's talking about, I would have cheated myself. So the student has to be very humble and grateful for instruction. But the student should not be a pushover, should not just take everything that the professor says as gospel truth. The professors need to challenge. And teachers and students together, this interaction, even if it's virtual, it's still a personal interaction. And we have to plan activities that do what is possible to build a community and virtual friendships among our students. Many of my assignments, I like to use things where the students must respond to each other. If you can do it verbally, it's wonderful. If you can't do it verbally, do it in writing. But you have to encourage the students to engage at a personal level. And you have to actually put yourself out there at a personal level. You can't just videotape lectures, put them up, okay, now write a commentary on this. You need to set up your structures in such a way that there is this interaction. It's not as good as the personal interaction, but it's a reasonable facsimile. And really, in many ways, we have to approach this as much as we can. I believe actually online teaching takes more work than in-person teaching for just this reason, because we actually have to take these obstacles into account. But obstacles make us better. Overcoming obstacles makes us better as teachers and students. So if we can get this right, if we put the effort in, we will achieve the results. And remember, our results are wisdom. Wisdom, it can and must be the goal of any online education program, just as it is in any residential educational program. online is a more challenging environment. Definitely. Yeah, I will say that over and over again. Online teaching is difficult. But with careful attention to the principles, not of online education, but of education, of what a university is, of what we're teaching, what we're trying to do, the minds we are trying to form. If we pay careful attention to that, to what constitutes a university and what we're doing, then the challenges of an online environment can be overcome. And we can use the online environment to our advantage to help our students access the wisdom of all the generations that came before, of all of our forefathers and foremothers. And we can make all of this knowledge and all of the practice of cultivating the intellect, of cultivating wisdom, we can make this more available to more people than ever before. So the online environment is challenging, but it's a challenge that's definitely worth taking. But we must pay attention to the first principles of what we're doing and why. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir, for your meaningful and wonderful talk. The participants are really benefited with your today's session. On the behalf of the entire organizing committee, I showcase the gratitude and gratefulness towards your concern, time, and the discussions. Thank you, sir.